I mean, like, this is creative enterprise. This is just like anything goes. That's the thing I always loved about rap, is that, like, you know, breaking the convention is like, I think that actually is what rap is about.
Yo, it's corrupt where I'm from, Edmonton tough. The streets could speak about the heads with drugs rough.
So the name Cadence Weapon, that was something that was like a mantra for me for a while. Like, I had different rap names before. Like, I used to go by Payroll, Prodigy, and, you know, it was like, I felt like it wasn't really fitting, because it was just like, you know, like what payroll am I talking about? Like, it was kind of like payroll-y or whatever, you know? So then I noticed when I used to like freestyle and stuff, I would just say, my cadence is my weapon, my cadence is my weapon. They just kept cycling in my mind, and I was just like, damn, Cadence Weapon, that's what I should be, you know? And it's like, I think it's very fitting, you know? It's like, I like to change my styles on songs and stuff, and that was like something that I always wanted to do, so Cadence Weapon. I was born in Edmonton, Alberta, Canada.
Which hospital?
Misericordia Hospital. I grew up in Millwoods. You know, at the time the neighborhood would have been Fountain Lake. I don't know if that still exists in the same way, because like I've tried to like look up some of the stuff. Like, I was on a community league basketball team when I was a kid, and my dad was a coach. And like I couldn't find the info. But yeah, I grew up in Millwoods, and I moved all around the city though, like typically living like either downtown or like Glenora, like Westmount. So, but I grew up in Millwoods.
Right now, I want you to reach for your green crayon and your coloring book. Just like a flick of the Bic, it's all over with. Thank you, E-Town. You can color me gone, because I'm in the way. Peace, love, and look out, Gina, baby. Rock on, roller coaster, and energize, baby Sierra. It's the Nubian love god, and the great, 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 great grandson of Mandingo. T.E.D.D.Y.
My parents were very important in shaping my musical taste. So my mom is a pianist, and my dad is Teddy Pemberton, who, you know, legendary DJ, CGSR, really, you know, a lot of people consider him to be the person who brought hip hop music to Edmonton, one of the first people to play it on the radio. So I grew up basically in a library of music, you know, just different, like all kinds of records of like funk, like electro, you know, just anything you think of. I was very inspired by my dad, because he was like a mashup DJ before that was a thing. He was the kind of person who was just playing like, he'd open up his sets with 2001 Space Odyssey and then close it with like Phyllis Hyman or something, you know, or then he played Jimi Hendrix, you know what I'm saying? Like, it's like, there's no rules, you know, and I feel like that really inspired me. And my mom is just a music aficionado too. Like, they used to go from town to town following Funkadelic on their tours. You know, like my parents are like real music fans, you know?
I am a man at odds with companies thought from even-handed, but I'm even-handed out cash for their jeans and hats and semen that I contradict quite slightly, conflicting wearing orange, blue, and white Nikes.
My family really inspired, you know, the way that I write, what I write about, you know, like I feel like, you know, being a part of a really strong black family in Edmonton, in the prairies, you know, being at the time, you know, like I didn't really know other families that looked like us, you know, and I feel like that was something like having pride in that from a young age really inspired a lot of what I write now. And just, you know, I want to give a shout out to my uncle, Brett Miles, who has always been a really big influence on me and just on my career, and just kind of a free-spirited, like, you know, my family, they've all been people who just like kind of you know, think outside the box, you know, and, you know, free thinkers, you know, and I feel like that inspired me. So my song, Oliver Square, you know, the idea of that song was, you know, I grew up listening to hip hop, and in hip hop there's a lot of regionalism, and you want to like rep your city, and it's always, the records were like, yo, New York, or like, I know every street name in New York. I know every location in New York. LA, same thing, right? And I was like, why isn't there like a song like that about Edmonton?
You know, the first line in the song, it's corrupt where I'm from, Edmonton. You know, it's just like, it catches you off guard.
It was a very hyper-local track. Probably the most hyper-local for its time. There was tracks that talked about Edmonton. I don't know if there were tracks that talked about like a neighborhood in Edmonton specifically.
Lyrically, a song like Oliver Square, to me at the time, and like it's sort of transcended this now and become more of a, you know, it's kind of an Edmonton anthem now. But at the time it was kind of like, oh yeah, this is all the stuff we're into. Like, you know, he's talking about going to Listen Records and talking to Chris there, and he mentions me, and I thought that was hilarious, and like talks about going Funky Pickle and like all this stuff that was like just stuff that we were doing. So at the time it felt like that was just like a relatable thing for us and for locals, and you know, like it was just kind of like a little tribute to Edmonton kind of vibe.
Some people at the time would have thought it was like kind of like corny, or like it's impossible to make it sound cool or whatever, or like it just seemed so unlikely at the time. But to me, I was just like, oh, Edmonton rules. So like, I want to make people proud. I want to make people like really excited about being from here, you know, like the civic pride thing. That was a big thing for me. And at the time, I lived really close to Oliver Square. You know, like I lived in Oliver, and I worked at the MacDonald's in Oliver Square for a while. Like, so I had like just a lot of like connections in my mind, you know, and that's really was the jumping off point for that song.
So, you know, it's got that underground hip hop lyricism. It's got that local representation where he's name dropping all these different clubs and all these different people in the scene, and you know, it's also got that kind of electronic vibe here, where, you know, it's not a typical beat that people would be rhyming over even back then. You know, he had the influences from like UK grime. He had the influences from electronic. He had the indie influences and the underground hip hop influences, and he stirred that into like a bowl, and he made something really dope.
So for the record, I feel like Black Hand was the more impactful song. You chose, you know, the other song.
He felt that
Fine.
he felt that
Fine.
that was sharp. He felt all the square sharp. I asked him.
All right.
I kind of wanted to get away from like the stereotype of what you think Edmonton is. Like, you think Alberta, you think like country, you think oil, you think like conservative place, you know, and that was all anyone really knew. And there's a big mall, and it's like people didn't really know anything else. And so for me, it's like, let me just give like a kind of, you know, like a very close reading of the place where I'm from, you know?
Oliver Square, it's so authentic, you know, to Edmonton. It's authentic to him and his unique character, and it's authentic musically as well to the fact that he has all these different influences.
I had met Rolly through Brett Miles, his uncle. I had done a few recordings for Magilla Funk Conduit, which is Brett's band, and he would bring in his nephew to come rap on stuff, and he'd bring in Rolly, and it's like, oh, like his little nephew's like actually this like monster rapper.
When I first heard Cadence Weapon, I'm like, yo, this it's weird and it's different, but it's good. You know what I mean? It was like this weird concoction. I'm like, I liked, you know what I liked? I liked that he was himself.
Because he was doing something unique, he was doing something different, and he was doing it well.
I guess that's the other thing about the crowd of Cadence Weapon is they were not necessarily a hip hop crowd.
You could tell he wasn't trying to fit in, which was, you know, what most artists are trying to do, is trying to fit in. He was obviously on the total opposite thing. He understood that, the importance of not fitting in. You know what I mean? I'm like, it's kind of like, he was totally different. And I could tell that he had like real hip hop influences You know what I mean? He wasn't just about like a guy that came out and made a pop song and blew up.
That actually is what rap is about, what hip hop is about, is like recontextualizing something, you know, like taking, you know, putting the cardboard out on the street and like dancing on it, you know, like that's rap, that's hip hop. I was away in university in 2004 in Hampton University in Virginia, and I was just like working on like some of this mixtape stuff, like just making beats, like different remixes, bootlegs, and just like I just wanted to like, you know, have some odds and ends and stuff, not really knowing what I was going to do with it. But then I had written all these songs that were going to be on my album, and I was just like, I need to just like drop out of school and focus on this music, you know, because like I was really paranoid that somebody was going to drop something exactly the same before me, you know, and I missed my opportunity or whatever. So in like January of 2005, that was when I was like, I talked to my mom, I dropped out of school. She gave me the ultimatum that basically, you know, like I'll give you a chance to work on this or whatever for a year. And if it's not popping by then, you got to go back to school. And so that was like enough motivation for me because I just wanted to make music.
When he came to make that record, he had made all these really cool beats. Like all the beats on the record are his. And a lot of those, again, were informed by all this different music that he was into. My first impressions when Rolly brought in the beats for Breaking Kayfabe, I had only ever previously heard him rapping with his uncle, with Brett. That's not entirely true. He did have a mixtape, and I had heard the mixtape, and the mixtape had some pretty rap shit on it too. But he brought in these beats, and they were like, they felt so forward-thinking and futuristic to me at the time, and with me getting into really heavily into electronic music at that time, and a lot of the stuff he was doing, like chopping stuff up and futuristic kind of synth sounds, and just like I hadn't heard anybody do that before.
It's crazy because I taught myself how to make beats. Originally, I would use like the Windows sound recorder program that just comes with the computer in Windows 95, and it was like there's no visual interface. It was just like a waveform, and you could like chop element, you could cut and copy and chop elements, but you can't see where you're putting anything. So it's all time code based. And so like I use some of the beats, at least one of the beats on my mixtape I made like that. And it's because it was like I would just erase. It's like a weird process, but it's like I would cut one sample out, I'd put it at the end, and that would be like the kick. And then like I'd think of like a drum and a snare, and I'd put that a little bit further ahead, and I would just keep doing that until I had a beat. And that was how I would sequence tracks back then. It's like, seems insane. Like I don't know how I did that. And the stuff ended up sounding like super abstract. But I think that's part of it, is that it was just such a weird, like novel way of making music. But yeah, everyone nowadays, you're lucky as hell. You got all these cool programs that are just way more robust.
And we became pretty good friends, Rolly and I. We were into a lot of the same music. We were buying a lot of music from the same places, and Rolly was writing for Pitchfork and like had this fairly big internet presence. He was also posting quite a bit on a variety of message boards that I can't remember what they are now, but like he was internet famous to some degree, just for being like very active online, but also for knowing a lot of different music and having a lot of different influences.
Gator Avenue, rapper hate crimes, double nickels on the dime, rhyme rates at decline, more the triple time, cause the rapper double time, and it's not just money. Tons of those jokes, shit's not funny. Garbage day folks, my yoke's all runny. Throw me in the junk cause you big dummy. My father and the son job possibly done. God.
Growing up in Edmonton, like the local artists that I would be influenced by, it wouldn't be typically all rap. It's actually, you know, for me, I was really influenced by Shout Out It Out. Nick Kozub, he, you know, recorded my first album, Breaking Kayfabe, and mixed it. And I used to just go to actually all the events in this building that we're in downstairs at the Victory Lounge, where he DJ'd. And I just got into this kind of like experimental electronic scene, and I saw bands like them, and also DJV and the Abominable Snowman. But rap-wise, I was always a big fan of Touch. Randy, I think, is just a very sick rapper, very underrated rapper. And I really like, you know, I like the weird stuff. You know, like I feel like the rappers that I really liked were like Conspiracy. You know, like I always thought he was really novel and epic. You know, like I thought he, you know, I always thought he was really funny. You know, so I think those are the top of mind that I would say. That was crazy. That was like a really big deal to me. And that was one of the things when I got on the cover of Exclaim. Like, that's when I felt like, that's like national, you know, like that's a big deal. People from Edmonton hadn't really been on the cover of Exclaim. Like, I know Choke was on the cover before me, but I can't off the top of my head recall, you know, like an Edmonton band getting on there before.
You know, it's just like, damn, this dude is doing it. It's like, okay, you know, he's figured out the formula that you know, we've been trying to figure out for a while. But part of it was that, you know, it's like, what is the formula to kind of getting recognition when you're from Alberta? What is the secret to getting put on? And this dude has figured it out, and he's running with it.
In that interview, yeah, they went to a show I played in Toronto, opening for Lady Sovereign. And just thinking back to that time is just really wild. Because it's just like, when I went out east, it was kind of like people just thought, this is the weirdest I've ever seen. You know, like this is a weird man doing this music, like what is going on here? And whenever I would tell people, like, you know, I'm from Edmonton, they'd be like, where's that? Or they'd be like, oh, sorry to hear that. That's what I got. And the thing about that is that made me go harder. It made me like be like, you'll never ever forget Edmonton. You'll never forget I'm from Edmonton.
When he started to get the acclaim, you know, in terms of like really good reviews on Pitchfork and other publications, it just added that, I don't know, it just kind of let people know like something from this province could come out in terms of hip hop and be considered like legitimate to that level. And, you know, I think it helps the rest of us because we, you know, when we say we're from Alberta, it's not just like puzzled looks that you'll get, you know, people, you can say, oh, you know, Cadence Weapon's from here.
Consider that if inside were outside, I'd be Al Pacino in the CBS office. The rap police make decisions by caucus of Caucasians and post-Africans posting up.
So the reaction to Oliver Square's success here in Edmonton, yeah, it was, in my opinion, it was a bit mixed. Because I think sometimes people don't know how to respond to something like going well for somebody else or whatever. Like, I feel like, you know, we had never really had anything happen like that.
And I was always kind of a weird kid with Brody, you know, like, so I wasn't like hating, like when he came out with like the sounds that were not classic hip hop. I was like, whoa, you know, a lot of cats were.
I think a lot of people didn't really get it. People didn't understand like why it was this music that was coming out of Edmonton that was blowing up, because it wasn't commercial. I never made commercial music, you know, and it was like, it didn't sound like anything else. And it was just like this weird music from a guy who's at the time dressing quite weird.
Oliver Square was not Black Hand, and there were a lot of people who reacted to that because it was like, what is this?
Logic would dictate I should do something that sounds like the rap that was happening at the time, that like had some kind of like sonic touchstones that people could vibe with.
The people that manage to have an impact outside of Edmonton are the ones that bring attention to Edmonton. And Rolly was one of those guys, and Oliver Square, that song was one of those songs.
Context for Cadence Weapon's sound, it was not like anything else, you know, and Sharks and Oliver Square definitely were like slaps in the face to people who were like traditional hip hop, boom bap. And yeah, he set you up nice because Black Hand was, you know, again on that. Like it was very Edmonton style.
The rappers who like knew me more closely, I think were pretty more happy for me. But then there was like other people who didn't really know me and they were just like, why is this guy blowing up? Or like people, I think I used to get people thinking I was like an industry plant. I had that experience. Like I remember in Toronto, like I played a show and this guy came up to me and was like, he's like, so what's your deal? Like, where did you came out of nowhere? Like, you know, like not knowing I've been just like rapping this whole time in the background and nobody knows that. But like, it's just like suddenly you're on Much Music, like, you know, what gives? Like, how much are they paying these people to do this? Like, you know, like I just experienced so much resistance to what I was doing because it's just so different than what was happening at the time, which I find really interesting now because it took, you know, 16 years, but now what I was doing back then seems conventional today. The legacy of Cadence Weapon would be just thinking outside of the box and innovating and wanting to do something that hasn't been done before.
I think Cadence Weapon is important to Edmonton music and to hip hop in particular as being kind of, I mean, really, I think he's probably, as far as I'm aware, he's kind of being the most successful rapper to come out of Edmonton.
The momentum was building up in Alberta towards us becoming more legitimate in the eyes of the overall Canadian and then global hip hop scenes. And when you get something that's nominated for a Polaris Prize and getting high reviews everywhere and you know, getting licensing deals with major labels like Big Data and Epitaph, like it's you know, it was part of, it was like the capstone, I guess, on a movement that was years in the making, you know, and it was just kind of that ultimate, like, yeah, we did this and you have to take us seriously. You can't, you know, you can't just take us as a joke anymore.
You know, we were talking about him being the poet laureate, which is something that not a lot of MCs have done Canada-wide. Possibly he's the only one Canada-wide. So that happened in Edmonton. He's also done like some pretty wild tours. Like he's headlined, you know, tours with like bigger names that we wouldn't think, you know, he's on level with, but on international level he is. And he's definitely represented us on way bigger scales than people know.
And I think that showing other artists that you can be from here and still make an impact nationally or internationally encourages other artists to do those things and to encourages other artists to tour and it encourages other artists to make their music available on wider platforms where I think previously to that, there's of course major exceptions to this, but I think that Edmonton has at times been fairly insular. Like the people's end goal is to play at the Starlight, which is a fantastic venue, but like the end goal is to play at the good venue in Edmonton. The end goal is not necessarily to headline a show in New York or to like do a European tour or something like that. The end goal is Edmonton. And I think that some artists, I would like to think that some artists were encouraged to get out on the road and do touring and approach their marketing a little bit differently because of what Cadence Weapon was doing, because of what Shout Out was doing.
I think it's hard for Edmonton hip hop to kind of cut through, and I think his music did that for Edmonton hip hop.
What he represents is that it is possible, you know, to get attention, to get respect, to get accolades from here from Alberta, from Edmonton, Calgary, wherever you're at. And you know, that was something that meant a lot to all of us.
In terms of recognition and people knowing who Cadence Weapon is, again, internationally, I think that kind of thing just, again, shows local musicians in Edmonton that there is a path to do that.
His story is still being written, and where he'll sit at the end of it all, we're still yet to see.
And I want people to, you know, when I put out records, like, it's not just for me, it's not just, you know, for me to like have a career or whatever. For me, it's really like, I want to open people's minds, and I really want people to know that, you know, they can do something different, like in any aspect of their lives, or like I want them to take something away from the music that they can use in their life, you know? I want to make useful music, you know, that, you know, the way I felt when I first heard like The Streets or like Dizzy Rascal or something, where it's like an entire world of possibility opens up just because I heard a record, you know? And it's like, I feel like that's something, you know, beyond, you know, putting like Edmonton Hip Hop on the map or whatever, like some people say that about me. I think that's really my true legacy, is just being creative and being fearless. That was something that was important to me. Is like, I did a lot of things that were risky, and it paid off.
Yo, it's corrupt where I'm from, Edmonton tough. The streets could speak about the heads with drugs rough. City life will leave you red with blood. Punch holes in the walls, then they fed the thugs lunch. After they rocked the party in a literal sense, sedimentary propensity, they hit the kid in the lip. You could be on White Ave having the time of your life, or then you get your arm broken by a random cab driver. Ask Katie. The nightlife is mad crazy when a drunk tries to steal your car. He was trying to play me, but I didn't let him. We peeled off quick, then we parked at IGA to break the seals off the lid. Don't generalize, you must think and wonder why I drink 40s and memorize bus link numbers. Well, I don't have a license, but I'm trying to gain prominence, cause I'm living in a house with a fridge full of condiments. See me on the bill, better follow me there. I solemnly swear I'll make it back to Oliver Square. See me on the bill, better follow me there. I solemnly swear I'll make it back to Oliver Square. See me on the bill, better follow me there. I solemnly swear I'll make it back to Oliver Square. See me on the bill, better follow me there. I solemnly swear I'll make it back.
I feel like I was dressed like Pharrell before Pharrell. You know, like I was honestly on that tip of wearing like tight jeans and like, you know, polo shirts, and like, you know, like I was just like, I had my own kind of vibe, you know? And I really stood out at a rap show.
I remember going to one of his shows and everybody was in skinny jeans. And skinny jeans at the time as well was like also the arch nemesis of hip hop. Because it was like, this is the opposite of baggy. And it was like, yeah, wear skinny jeans. And it's like, whoa. And then people started sagging their skinny jeans. It was wild. 2005, wild time. So that was also going on, you know, skinny jean wars. But yeah, his shows are full of people with skinny jeans. And I remember that being like, whoa. I was impressed that it was full, and I was also like, whoa. I could see everybody's leg. It's like extremely detailed. Like every muscle, just like flexing. And I was like, it was the time. So this is what you got at a Cadence Weapon show.
I also have often suspected that, when Tyler, the Creator, came out, I was furious. Because I was like, this is literally what I've been doing. He's kind of dressed like me. It was really annoying. And people would send me messages all the time and be like, this guy's like exactly like you. It's like, have you heard this guy? Like, it's like very, like, I would get tons of messages like that. It's like, man, they got to me.